Um, let's start with the cost associated with operating a business. My super awesome, wonderful, sexy girlfriend Laura has made this graph for me. Now I'm going to come up here so that you can see it a little more closely. You see that? This part right here says raw materials and overhead. This part here says taxes and user fees. And this little part right here says gross profit. This is your sort of typical scenario in terms of expenses for a company, most companies actually, in North America. So, and this taxes and user fees side right here, and please ignore my barking dog on the patio. She's just very jealous about not being in this film. So you've got not just licensing fees, but you've got building permits. You've got government inspectors that have to be paid. You've got installation fees, certifications, and yes, licensing for let's say for instance you're starting a restaurant. You've got to get permits for the kitchen. That's all got to be approved. Your staff have to be certified, etc., etc. And then you've got to pay, excuse me. Then you've got to pay taxes, not just on what you make, but on everything that you buy as well. So that's why this slice of the pie is so high. Taxes and user fees are much larger than most people think they are. And of course, raw materials and overhead, I mean, that doesn't need a lot of explanation. You've got well, if you're a restaurant, then you've got raw shrimp, and you've got your rent, your lease, well, whatever else it is. You got to pay your minions and your insurance and all the rest of that. And so if you're lucky, let's say that this is a pizza, because it's round. And out of all of that, that's how much of the pizza you have to sell in order to pay those. That's how much of the pizza you have to sell to pay those. And that's how much of the sale price of the pizza you actually get to put in your pocket. Let's call that 10%. Now, what does that have to do with things being easier down here than they are in the US or Canada? Well, a few things. One, I did just a little bit of really simple math. Let's just take a quick look here at some of the math that I did. This, by the way, is not any specific set math that, I'm not breaking down an actual company. But let's just say, as an example, you've got, as the business owner, you've got to pay rent or mortgage $1,500 a month, utilities, cable, internet, water, sewage, whatever, another $500. Medical insurance, by the way, medical insurance is the second largest expense for homeowners in the U.S., which is a tragedy, but that's also the topic for another video. And that's $300 per person. And then you've got food, insurance for your home and your car, etc., etc. We call that $300. And then you've got other costs like transportation, Halloween costumes, cheese graters, fireworks, medical marijuana, heavy-duty stand removers, imported mustards, etc. All the usual typical stuff that we all need to make up our lives. And that totals out at $3,600 a month. So, in order to get enough of these sold that the tiny little bit that's right here will equal $3,600 a month, let's just do this little math right here. $3,600 divided by so you've got to sell $72,000 worth of pizza in order to make your $3,600 a month profit. See, that's what that means. And that's pretty typical for a profit, gross profit breakdown in the US or Canada. And by the way, this does not include the tax on your income. Does not include income tax. So, why is it so much easier and so much better to actually start a business down here? Well, imagine if you could take this part right here, the taxes and user fees part, and have that look more like this. So instead of it being almost 50% of what you're bringing in on each pizza, it's only this little bit. Look what that does to the amount of money that you actually make. It increases it by 4 times, which means that it reduces the number of pieces that you have to sell by 3/4. So instead of having to sell $72,000 worth of pizzas, you only have to sell, times 0.25, $18,000 worth of pizzas. That makes a big, big difference. Let's look at the other side of this expense thing right here. This raw materials and overhead bit. Well, what if you could get that to look like that? Instead of it being all the way up to there, what if it were only that bit right there? So if that were also reduced by a quarter, now instead of having to sell $18,000 worth of pizzas in order to pay for your $3,600 a month overhead, you would only have to pay, do the math yourself. I'm not doing everything for you. Suffice it to say, all of a sudden, you're literally having to generate less than $10,000 a month in order to meet your expenses. Now, here's where things get really interesting. That's pretty obvious, and you can email me or put some comments up if you need me to walk through that again. But it's pretty obvious how what the financial advantages are to doing business here if you can reduce your taxes and fees so much. And a lot of people watching this are going to be very skeptical, but I can just tell you right now, income tax here is a flat rate of 7% compared to a nominal rate of 30 whatever percent in the U.S. and over 40% in Canada. That's a huge difference. And it's not just a difference that you benefit from, but it's on your own income, but it's a difference you benefit from on the amount that you have to pay to your employees as well, because those savings come right back to you. The same thing is true for your licensing fee. On this part here is so, a lot of people will be very skeptical, saying, how can you get your raw materials and overhead down so low? Well, the minimum wage down here is $2 an hour. How can it be so low? Because I'm living in this awesome place. This is my view, full of toucans, iguanas, sloths, hummingbirds, whatever, cathedral ceilings. This apartment is bigger than lots of people's houses, and I pay $400 a month in rent. My electrical bill, even with fans and air conditioning and all the rest of that, is less than $40 a month. I know people who have started companies and have been working away at them and doing very, very poorly at them for 5 years. But they have been able to stay in business because their monthly expenses are less than $1,000 a month. That's a huge competitive advantage. So one of the people, so when people say, oh my God, it's so difficult, it's so much more difficult than it is to start a business in the USA or Canada, frankly, they're full of crap. They don't know what they're talking about. If they had tried to start a business in the States, the way that I've seen them try to start businesses down here, they would have absolutely failed. They wouldn't have lasted 2 months. I mentioned that the people that have been working on a travel advisory company for 5 years, that they wouldn't have lasted 5 weeks if they had been trying to do that in the States, because they don't know hardly anything about business. A very, very good friend of mine started a restaurant down here. Didn't even know the language, couldn't speak the language, but he got into the hospitality business. Made all sorts of mistakes, purchased things that he didn't need, etc., etc. Again, his rent on his entire restaurant was only $400 a month when he got it. You just simply couldn't do that.